folks at the Cog,
Jen, I can't stop your screen sharing meeting.
Sorry.
okay,
Hard to be taking minutes and
sorry.
Oh, I know.
Thing
I could take it away from you, but I hate it. I'm the only one looking at it anyway. It's not a big deal.
stop share. Okay, here we go.
All set? So the folks at the COG asked to update the planning board on a proposal for some work up at the top of the mountain. And so Earl is, I think Jen sent around a PowerPoint to everybody, but I don't know if everybody took a look at it. But anyway, Earl's here to review and get feedback from the board. Of any questions, concerns, if any, after he's completed. What I did ask Earl to do, so the PowerPoint that I looked at this afternoon has, I think, 15 slides. And actually, here's paper copies. It took me a while to get in my head where the project was until I got to the last slide. And then when I got to the last slide, there being tanks and other perspective, I could better understand, okay, here's where they're talking about. So I asked Earl to put the last slide up first, and then he can go wherever he wants after that. So I'll turn it over to Earl.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jennifer. Hi, Tara. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just wanted to remind everyone that we are here for a conceptual, and that nothing has been filed. No application has been filed. The purpose of this conceptual is that there's been a lot of news, there's been a lot of press with regards to an announcement that the COG made at the March 4th Mount Washington Commission meeting. It's been all over the press. You've probably taken a look at some of that. Different petitions. There was Edith Tucker had done an article following that meeting. I did bring a couple copies of that. If I'm not sure if folks had seen that. I thought that was a pretty good overview from that March 4th meeting.
When you say meeting, this is a Mount Washington
Commission meeting. That's correct. And I was going to be able to jump right into that, but since Mr. Chairman asked me to start at the end of the presentation, I have no idea where any of this is going to go now.
Well, just showing the picture, then you can go back to the beginning.
So I think what Mr. Chairman was asking me to do is that, what is Lizzie's station? We've heard a lot about Lizzie's station. What is it that you folks at the railway are thinking about with regards to this? So this is the last slide in the presentation. Lizzie's station is proposed to be at Lizzie's Corner. The Lizzie's station will comprise of a new switch and two 500-foot tracks. And accompanying platform. So, if this is the memorial, the Lizzie's monument here, we're going with the two new tracks in the platform, 500 feet, and then probably another 100 feet for the transit. And there might be some, and when I go into the other part of the presentation, there might be a few changes with that. So this is, just to give you a visual, this is what it is that we're looking at for Lizzie Station. These are all coaches. They're the same size as the coaches that we have now, 40 feet in length. There's not 18 coaches here, but it'd be anticipated that there would be 18 coaches and then possibly a couple coaches, depending upon what we find out with some of the studies that we're going to do for like a service coach of some sort. So let me start all the way back from the beginning so I can really. So probably 2 years ago, I think we were before the board, and I think we were up in Berlin, if I remember. And we
Before
were
the pandemic, so yes.
Yeah, just before the nurse.
yeah.
At least
So
2 years.
we were before you with an application for what we called a track restoration project, and what that involved was this picture here is 2014 or before. This portion of track is not here now, and we had come before you to talk about restoring this track and platform. So I think you all remember that hearing. So over here, I put up a map that's used in the title report that the Attorney General has worked on in conjunction with us. And I thought it would be helpful just to remind everyone as to what all these colors mean and what the ownership rights are. Because I know that was something that was subject of that meeting we had. So everything here in yellow is owned by the state of New Hampshire. Everything in blue, which is C and D here, is owned in fee by the railway. This, as you all know, goes all the way down to Marshfield. I think it's a 26-acre parcel, 99 feet wide.
It's more than that.
Yeah, okay.
60.
This says ROW is a right-of-way. This is an easement that the railway has for railroad purposes. The reception at the planning board and the reception that you folks received from folks and from the Mount Washington Commission was not what we had anticipated it to be. So we went back to the drawing board with the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources and the Attorney General's office and many other stakeholders to determine what could we do different than do our track restoration project here. So after 2 years of conversations with the DNCR, the Attorney General's office, that's where we've come up with Lizzie Station. So let me. Lizzie Station, outside of the Summit Circle. That Summit Circle, that big yellow circle, that's the land owned by the state. We're now proposing, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, to put Lizzie Station on land that is completely owned by the railway. As I had mentioned when I started from the last slide, there's a new transfer switch, 2 500-foot tracks, and the idea is that all passengers that ride up the train will depart here at Lizzie Station, and then they'll have the opportunity to either take the shuttle train, one shuttle train that will be here at Lizzie Station, and go back and forth to the Sherman Adams. Or they'll have the opportunity to hike from Lizzie Station. We initially talked about doing hardening the Nelson Crag Trail, but we're in discussions right now with the DNCR and others with regards to maybe making a path with rails using the old 25-pound rail from Lizzie's up to the summit. Let's see, I'll talk about that after. So Lizzie Station, I had mentioned that we would hope to have 18 coaches there. We would have shelter and food and beverage coaches. We would have bathroom coaches. We would have sleeper coaches. Our hope would be to connect to the existing power line. Our intent would be to drill a new well. We would run the wastewater effluent in a pipe from Lizzie Station above ground all the way down to the base station. All solids would be pumped by a service coach. We would intend to install a fiber optic cable that would be affixed to the existing trestle from Marshfield all the way to the summit. Let's see, we have talked a lot about some of the work that I want to do tonight with regards to what type of studies we would need to do. We've talked a lot about creating a flora and fauna educational display and app that I think I'll talk about a little bit later. Lizzie Station will be available to all summit visitors. So whether you hike to the summit or drive up the auto road, you'd be able to get on the one shuttle train and visit Lizzie's. The intent would be to bring the coaches up to Lizzie Station in mid-May and secure them there and leave them there for the operating season, which would be May 15th till maybe October 15th. I had mentioned the Nelson Crag Trail, but we are in conversation with the DNCR. You can see this area from Lizzie's. If Lizzie Station ended here and folks decided to walk rather than take the shuttle train, this is the area that we would envision the trail right along the side of the tracks there. Folks have asked the question with regards to the amount of space that exists between the Sherman Adams building and our right of way, and where passengers either get off the train or get back on the train. So I thought this might be a good visual, and I think doing rough measurements, the greatest distance here is about 62 feet. And the shortest distance, 42 feet, but there is some electrical boxes or hardware in there. And what's the length of this?
208 feet.
208 feet. So the creation of Lizzie Station would provide a significant larger area. just another perspective. So the memorial, so it's this area here. So how did we get here? This is part of the discussions that we've had with the DNCR and with the Attorney General's office. I think we all recognized that doing something in here was not going to be good for the amount of people and amount of visitors that are coming to the summit these days.
Space.
Yeah.
Tight.
And in the discussion, someone said, is there a way that we can maybe move something off the summit? And that's when we started, looking at this area here. And I think initially we thought that, well, this might be a very similar experience that we're creating, like the auto road, because they drive up and they're parking, and then they have a nice climb here on the stairs up to this entire area. So same here, we'd be coming up and we'd be having our own station with amenities and people would again have the option to ride the shuttle train or to walk. So let's see. So the benefits that we were looking at with the DNCR, and I think everyone knows that the Mount Washington Commission is in the process of doing some master planning here for the summit, is, I think we hit on this, significantly reduces congestion and development, within this area. It helps facilitate, discussions on how to utilize this space. Because there's, these 2 years, could have been, partially some legal wrangling with regards to what is it that the railroad, has the rights, to do here. And, working together and trying to come up with these benefits, the railroad has asked for, support of the DNCR for this application, and that's resulted in, discussions with regards to clarifying the railroad's rights here in this right of way, an agreement with the railroad, to further develop within that right of way and to maintain the existing, footprint there. Let's see. Promotes and helps promote the safe, orderly, and efficient management of the limited space there. Provides critical additional infrastructure. We all know the issues with some of the infrastructure up here. We'd be providing, restrooms, water, sewage, additional sewage capacity, and bringing fiber. And I think, Mr. Chairman, you might remember we were working with Brentwood's Telephone at one point in time to get fiber, but that's something that we will do. Let's see. Moves some of the facilities outside of this summit circle, off the cone, which is actually in keeping with the master plan that was done in 1971. It's certainly a substantial investment that will support New Hampshire tourism, economic activity, and overall park experience here. And also, I think importantly would support, any anticipated, growth that the park is seeing, because I think, this is going to help reduce a lot of that, congestion and I'm not sure if she wants me to point her out, but Commissioner Sarah Stewart from the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources is here this evening, so
Yeah.
she I don't know if she wants to say anything or if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
That would be just fine if she'd like to.
Thank you. Sarah Stewart, Commissioner of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So whenever you've heard DNCR, that was me for the most part in these meetings. And we're in a room that I'm familiar with because we have staff here in this building with our Trails Bureau and our foresters. We share this building with Fish and Game, as you know, and we let them decorate, as you can see, with the deer heads on the wall. I'm here tonight because I wanted to show my support for this vision for this project. I've been in many conversations with Wayne and Earl over the past 2 years since their last iteration, and their creativity and willingness to really hear the park's perspective of what's happening at the summit has allowed us to have this back and forth conversation that has led to what you're seeing this evening. The park is busy. I don't know if you've been up there lately, but it's crowded, which, on the one hand, it's great. We're exposing something special in New Hampshire to a lot of people from all over the world. But we have to think long term, and we need to preserve a quality experience at the top of the mountain while not, creating a mini New York City at the summit of our tallest mountain. So having this extra experience a little bit off the summit will alleviate the pressure to develop more at the summit. Clarifying the right-of-way allows us to go forward with a master plan that doesn't leave questions on the table. And there's a legacy of people spending the night at the top of Mount Washington, and I think it's something that will provide a very unique experience for Granite Staters and visitors. And as overseeing our state park system, working in partnership with the Cog, as we do with the Auto Road and the Observatory, and the local chambers of commerce up in the North Country, I think that we're creating a really exciting portfolio of experiences for people. So I wanted to drive up and offer that to you.
Well, Commissioner Stewart is here. Anybody got any quick questions they wanted to send her way? So I just have one. So over the years, and as time goes on, it's more and more years, but over the years, I've always heard a discussion about whether or not there should be a cap in the number of visits to the top of the mountain in any one day.
Yeah.
Have any of those discussions taken place recently, or?
Yes, in fact, we have talked about that. It's on the list of topics during our master planning process. Other mountains across the country, across the world, have reservation systems and do sort of try to maintain that. This is a little different. Hiking is a sought-after experience at this mountain, so people come to the top in many different ways. But certainly, there's specific things that dictate capacity, like how many times you can flush the toilet at the top of the mountain. So we're working through these numbers, these data points, as we have the master planning discussions with the stakeholder group, led by Senator Jeb Bradley, who serves as chair. And capacity is definitely something that we are putting into the master plan as a discussion point. I don't think we're going to have an answer by the time the master plan is finalized, but it's something that we all are very cognizant of, and it's sort of a topic that helps us dictate future capital expenses, etc.
So you're in the process of updating the master plan. Now this is an update of the 1971 master plan. Okay. What's your sense of when that'll be finalized?
We're hopeful that it'll be finished by the end of this calendar year.
Any other questions for the moment? Yes.
I don't know if you want to answer this.
If you could identify yourself.
Oh yes,
just so we can talk.
I'm Jamie Sayen. I live in Stratford. I don't know whether this is for you or for you gentlemen, but I've heard several times this is going to relieve congestion on the summit, and yet actually it's a plan to bring more people here. So I'm a little confused about how we're actually going to increase visitors and decrease congestion. I get that the location of the Lizzie thing will be just off of the state property, so it will be somewhat removed from the Adams building, et cetera. But then the little shuttle brings everybody up there anyway, and so I don't understand how significant reduction in congestion is achieved by this, so I'd be interested in how that happens.
All right, and whoever wants to answer.
So, currently what happens is the railroad, brings 3 to 4 trains every hour up to the summit, and it drops off the passengers on those. And, it leaves those passengers off, the first trains in the morning, leave passengers off, and they go back down empty. And so, it's just dropped off 210 to 280 people. Then it comes back up with another triple of 210 people. So you've got 490 to 500 people in a matter of 10 minutes getting on and off the train in that one location right out in front of that building. And that causes a lot of congestion. This proposal would bring all of that traffic down to Lizzie's station with just one train going up back and forth all day long. That only has a capacity of 70 people. So you're gonna have, you know, at most 140 people getting on and off, you know, every 5 to 10 minutes instead of 500.
I mean, so that of the 280 people who were brought up on the first couple of runs, something like 210 of them will be waiting for the shuttle to come back and get them, and so some of them will be waiting 3 or 4 times for the shuttle?
No, all of those passengers would get let off at Lizzie's station.
Yeah.
And then there would just be one shuttle train from there that holds 70 people that they could get on and ride up to the summit on. Those people would then be up at the summit, and that train would come back down, pick up another 70, go up, and those people would then either get back on that shuttle and come back down, walk down, whatever. The plan here really isn't to bring more people, it's to spread the people out.
But they're all gonna end up at Sherman Adams essentially and the summit.
I don't believe that that's the case. The Sherman Adams building is too crowded as it is, and when it was built, they knew at the time when they built it that it needed to be 4 times the size of what it was, and the state wouldn't approve the funds for it, so they ended up building something that would only house 400 to 500 people, figuring that on the busiest of days, everybody would be outside. But as we all know, if the weather changes, you know, there isn't enough room to let everybody in.
And what's the anticipated capacity for the shelter coaches that'll be at Lizzie's for folks to go in and sit down as they
200 and 250. And if I might add, you know, you talk about limiting the capacity to the summit. Well, that's pretty easy to do with the railroad or the auto road. You could go to them and say, look, this is all the people we want to have come up here. How do you limit the number of hikers going up? And they are the biggest users of the summit. In fact, when the study was done in 1971, there were more people hiking to the summit than there were people going up the train and the auto road combined. There was 120,000 people.
That's a 50-year-old survey. How many hikers? Chris Magnus.
Time out. One person at a time,
Sorry.
so I can keep track. Go ahead, continue.
So, you know, in this same time frame, you know, the number of people going up the auto road and the Cog have tripled. And I can tell just from the number of people that are coming into the base station that are hiking that it's gone up 3, 4, 5, 6 times as far as the number of hikers. And I'm sure that, you know, Sarah can support the, you know, suggestions I'm making there that, you know, the number of people hiking to the summit has gone up phenomenally.
Okay, sir, in the corner.
Oh,
Did you have
sorry.
it? And please realize, and I probably should have made this clear earlier, this is a conceptual meeting. So I don't mind taking questions at all, but like I say, this is all conceptual at this point, so we just need to remember that. But if you can identify yourself so we can get it for the minutes.
Chris Magnus, Keep the Whites Wild. I think that if we're going to talk about numbers, we should be accurate with them. I do, so you mentioned 250, yes, that's presumably in the infrastructure, the restaurant. How many overnight, guests, what is the overnight capacity of Lizzie's?
There'd be 35 rooms there, 2 people to a room, 70.
70 or so, and on a peak day, a peak summit day, 5,000 summit visitors or so.
From every location, that includes Cog, Auto Road, and hikers. And I believe that out of those numbers, I know that on our busiest days, we take up like maybe 1,500. I know the Auto Road is similar, so that means there's 2,000 hikers coming to the summit as well.
Did I answer your question okay?
Yep.
Sir in the blue?
Yeah, Roger Doucette, Whitefield, New Hampshire. Where is this in relationship to the AT corridor? And how does that affect that?
Well, first of all, you want me to? So the AT corridor is down quite a ways from where Lizzie's is. But I might add that, there isn't a hiking trail that crosses the railroad's property that has been granted any property rights. All of those trails that cross there are crossing there basically without any permit whatsoever. And there's no deeded rights to that whatsoever, but we allow them to do it all the time, and I have no intention of stopping that, obviously, but, we're allowing them to do that on a regular basis, and happy to do it.
Yeah, I know the AT corridor often is much wider than the trail. I mean, it's protected by, anywhere sometimes from 750 to 1,500 feet. And I was just wondering, does that amount of distance get closer to this? I mean, in a way that...
It would if they actually had a right of way across the railroad's property, but they don't.
And the cars that are going to be up there in place, the 18 cars, they said they were going to be 40 feet long like the others. What about the width? Is the width going to stay the same?
The width is actually going to be narrower than the existing cars, 8.5 feet versus 10
This would be for the overnight cars?
for the overnight cars. There is talk that there's going to be slide outs within there that would make them wider. So 3 feet on either side, so they would come out to a total of 14.5 feet as opposed to 10.
And what is the width of the right-of-way there?
99 feet.
99 feet.
Yeah.
Yes, Mike.
So, I think Edith had a good article, as did a few others. You've got the, as part of this proposal, you've got a septic line leaving Lizzie's to the bottom. So I got a couple of questions here. It may take me a bit, but the first question is I understand what you're saying. You're going to separate the solids from the liquid. You're going to fire the liquid down. You're going to pump the solids.
The solids would be collected in tanks just like they do at the summit now. They only treat the effluent in their treatment plants up there. The effluent would go down the mountain and would go into leach fields at the base.
And are you going to be solving the state's problem as well or are they going to continue with their septic up above?
The state?
We are on track to continue with our current upgrade with our septic and water at the summit.
So this is, what you do is going to stay, the state's going to do what it does currently. And what you're proposing will eliminate the COG's contribution to the state system.
That's
But
correct.
that's the plan. So I don't think unless you've actually done work on the summit, and I've done quite a bit over the years, you really can't appreciate how miserable it is to be in that summit building when you have all those trains arrive and you've made the mistake of maybe waiting a little too long to go to the bathroom. You will be in a line, and if somebody's sloppy in front of you, so it goes. So that is.
Thank you for that visual.
Well, it's a visual for you, it's a memory for me. And that is a huge benefit. It's just you can't exaggerate it. It's miserable up there when you have a large crowd arrive, you know, at any given time, no matter how they got there, because the state's just not, that building is not equipped to handle crowds. They just can't do it, and the staff up there is never, ever, and I only go back to '74, but I can tell you in 1974 they didn't have the staff to keep ahead of it. Don't now either. So that's all good. Now, the sense I'm getting here, and I understand that you're not a nonprofit and you don't want to be a business that's nonprofit, but you've actually proposing to create a destination down at Lizzie Station. So people who might have gone to the summit and sat in the cafeteria or hoped to sit in the cafeteria but couldn't get in are going to be in one of your cars if they came up on the train.
That's true.
Okay, and that, is there also going to be other, it sounds like you're going to create a visitation experience so that people might be tempted, if they go to the summit at all, it'll be for a very short period of time.
Most of our patrons don't go for a long period of time anyway. They go up, they spend their hour and they come back down. We give them the option of staying longer, but most of them don't. I suppose on a really nice day, they might want to stay up there longer. But you know, I'd like to back up and hit on one point. You know, I've heard a lot of rumblings about this. Well, you know, Presby's just trying to make as much money as he can with this deal. To be honest with you, that could be the farthest thing from the truth. We're in the process right now of transferring our whole company over to an ESOP. We're setting up a trust, an ESOP trust that was going to be completely owned by the employees of the Cog Railway. And so any benefit that comes out of any of these projects in the future is going to accrue to them and go into you know, funds that they will be using for their retirement. And we've already started the appraisal process on that and everything else. It takes a while to get these things set up, but I hope to have it set up by the end of the year. So the Cog Railway is going to be a completely employee-owned company when we're done.
Just for the record, I have no problem with people making money. I kind of require it. I know my customers complain from time to time, and I hope they'll understand. But you know, that's what makes the world go round. And the state of New Hampshire certainly, at every level, is cash conscious. So if the state park is losing money, then services are always challenged. So it's a good thing if you can fund it, what's going on up there. But I just want to be clear on what's being proposed. What I see is the only thing that would be different as far as additional capacity would be the overnight capacity, and the actual crowding on the summit. I don't see how it isn't alleviated by this.
It certainly sounds like it's spread out during the course of the hour instead of a large group getting dumped off. You know, smaller groups every 10 minutes.
Dispersed is really the, and we're talking about a lot of things in this master planning process too, that we hope is going to tend to disperse people even further. Right now, there's probably, you know, as many as 6 different hiking trails that all approach the summit from different directions. But there's really no like loop trail around the summit, little short loop trail around the summit. And I know people are always concerned about people walking through areas where there's, plants that are endangered and stuff like that. But if you give someone a nice flat path to walk on, they're not gonna go out and walk around through a bunch of rocks and grass and stuff like that, if they have a nice smooth surface to walk on. And so one of the things that we've been discussing there is to make a nice loop trail that goes around the summit, that people that are visiting the summit from the auto road and the Cog would tend to follow. They're not gonna, go down these other trails that hikers tend to use.
Let me just, I hope I didn't jump away from you if you had another question before I went to Mike. Did we answer everything?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, more questions pop up, but I'm
Sure.
good right now, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just wanted to double check if the applicant finished your presentation. We had gotten to your last slide and then we kind of
Yes, but
steered away. So if you need but I had some questions on that.
no, go ahead. But I have a bunch more that I'd like to share. So,
Okay.
yes.
The key benefits, I think we've kind of talked at that. I had some of the same concerns about, I'm reading reducing congestion and stuff, but I'm also reading supporting the anticipated growth. But again, I think that's been kind of covered. Following up on the commissioner mentioned the legacy of staying overnight. With these sleeper coaches, would there be people staying consecutive nights, or how is it anticipated?
I imagine that some people will stay consecutive nights, but I think it'll be very much a situation where they come up and they spend one night and they come back down. I mean, maybe somebody might go up there and spend 2 or 3 nights, but I think it'll be the exception rather than the rule.
Okay. Something to be considering. Following on Mike's with the effluent and so forth, we'd probably want to hear if you're coming when you come back, because you're saying how this will be a seasonal, and basically by October you're going to be shutting down. But I'd want to hear about what happens. Is that pipeline going to be all cleaned out or something, or in terms of you got this pipeline carrying effluent down while you're open during the summer, before or as part of shutting down for the winter, will be there some kind of treatment or work on that?
So because it's all downhill, it should be clear of everything and all like that, but we're gonna use advanced telemetry and filtration systems and stuff, because the last thing that we want is any solids whatsoever to get into the line, because that's where, you would have the line back up. So we just want clear effluent going down this pipe. And there's also talk that we may in fact put we have a couple of old Pelton water wheels that ran off of penstocks that were up on both the Amanusic and Franklin Brooks, and that's where we got all the power for the Cog when I first bought the place in 1983 until we ran the power line in. And we're thinking about actually putting a check valve in there and allowing that to build up to 200 pounds and then dispersing it through a Pelton water wheel to actually generate electricity off the effluent as it comes down.
I had hydro on sewage. I love it.
There you go.
Why not? Who would think of such a thing?
You had mentioned too, and again, it'll be interesting to see about people walking, reaching the summit on foot from Lizzie's up. So, just in terms of safety things and stuff. And you kind of touched on it, but that's something we'll be looking for.
Yeah.
to
So
know
one of the concerns, and we've had the opportunity to meet in advance with the Society for Protection of Forests, Audubon, AMC, Nature Conservancy, Appalachian Trail Conservancy. So we've met with all the various groups that are, we're all concerned with development in the PD6 and the High Alpine, zone. And that's where the suggestion had came about with, let's not harden the Nelson Crag Trail there's already a very disturbed, area along the side of the tracks. Maybe we can build, and we were talking to the Trail Conservancy folks, we could build steps into that area. And Wayne had said we'll take the 25-pound rail that they've just pulled off the mountain, and we'll make actual rails, because there's concern that folks are going to get to Lizzie's and then just jump off the platform and wander around the meadows and whatnot there. So this is
Oh, so you say rails, you mean like a handrail?
handrails, that's right,
Made
handrails,
out of the old
old rails,
Okay.
yep. So that you can keep them contained
Yeah.
and for safety. I think it's about 800 feet from Lizzie's, that point up to the by the Sherman Adams building.
And of
So,
course, there'll be handrails all the way around the platform as well, so that people can't just jump off and go into areas that we don't want them. And, the plan is to, have them funneled into very specific areas. And, once we get the fiber optic line up there, we intend, and in fact, this is modeled right after what they've just done out of Pikes Peak in Colorado, to put QR codes up in all kinds of places so that people can just scan that with their phone, and they can get all the details about the flora, the fauna, the history, all kinds of things, and they can pull that right up on their phone. Now with such poor internet service up there, they really don't get that educational experience that we're going to be able to give them.
So to expand on that, I've initiated the process with the Natural Heritage Bureau and Fish and Game, and UNH, the College of Life Science and Agriculture, was the last group to do the full study of flora and fauna within that summit circle. So we've been meeting with the dean of the college, and we're trying to get them on board to do that study in addition to the proposed area of disturbance, and to create a program in which that it's studied year after year by interns or externs, which gives fresh information to the app that Wayne is talking about, provides all the information to all those other partners. We've shared this concept with the other partners, and their initial response is can we add things to that, to that app? So I think there's an opportunity for some significant collaboration there, with the flora and the fauna.
And finally, on your final slide, I did appreciate, and we've seen it throughout this, the idea of maintaining the existing footprint that the COG has within the circle. I appreciated seeing that, and appreciate and will want to hear more about you're working with the Attorney General's office about amending the easement, the right-of-way easement, to clarify, because as you recall, that initial meeting we had about this way back in Berlin, that was one of the concerns, because it wasn't your property we were talking about doing it on. There's all this stuff going on within an easement, and that always gets, especially the lawyer types.
Don't get it going.
That sends a little antenna up and stuff sometimes about when people say, I've got my rights, I've got an easement. It's like, well, yeah, but so again, I appreciate and will be looking forward to hearing more about your efforts to clarify that and just nail down, because some of that's very old easements and deeds, and like you said, and I mean we're talking about a master plan in the 70s, but this stuff was long before the 70s,
1894.
Well,
Yeah.
there's, and I don't want to get into this, but there are a lot of rights that are out there. I mean, I've got rights to put a building up there that's signed by governor, council, and the Mount Washington Commission, and we're giving up that right as well. And that wasn't all that old. That was done in like 1980 or something.
So,
Question
Tom,
is that, can I ask a question? Was that in the circle, right?
Excuse me?
That was in the circle?
Yes, yes, on the right of way. It says very specifically that the Cog Railway is allowed to put up a building, the right of way is interpreted to allow the Cog Railway to put up a building within the bounds of the right of way. And we're gonna give that right up, and when you talk about what's happening there, we're actually, putting, an easement deed together pursuant to the MOU that is going to go into escrow. And once Lizzie's is completed and approved, that gets released and clarifies all those rights.
so we have gone so far as to put together a memorandum of understanding, which has been 2 years of drafting, and I think it's called a restated and amended easement deed, which it'll be signed by the DNCR, the Governor's Council, the Attorney Generals, and the Governor. So we will be sharing that, and essentially it limits the COG's rights to what exists now inside that Summit Circle. And there's ongoing discussions with regards to the property that's owned in fee. It's a 80 by 200 that parcel. Doing an exchange with the state where we would deed that property to them inside the Summit Circle for maybe some of that land that's near those kerosene tanks that you see in the picture. So we're in discussions with regards to that as well.
Thank you.
So to add, so that I wasn't getting into detail with that presentation, there's discussion with, and I think this would involve our permitting efforts and what you folks might require, is that the existing track, and we're not sure which direction, but that existing through track, we're thinking we might put a slight curve in that and bring it over to more to the right side of the property, closer to the new 500-foot track. So if the sleeper coaches looking up the mountain are on the right side, the platform between that through track and the sleeper coaches, making up the number, is maybe 10 feet. So that whole area would essentially just be accessible to the folks that are staying overnight, which allows us to make the platform on the other side, the left side of that through track to the far track, to be about 50 feet, which is going to provide even a significant more travel space and viewing space for passengers that are getting off the train or getting back on, and those service cars, the food and beverage cars, the bathroom cars, shelter cars would all be on that left side. Now, all of this, we've already had meetings with the New Hampshire Fire Marshal's office, because although this might sound good to all of us, we are making sure as we go through this process before we come to you folks with any sort of an application, that the fire marshal says all of this can be
They
done.
certainly will need to bless it for life safety codes and all that stuff.
Correct. So we are
Conceptual, you got a lot of stuff done.
The other thing that I might add, some people have said, well, geez, how are you gonna construct this platform? I mean, is it gonna be sticking way up in the air, or what is it? The platform's gonna be terraced because there's a grade there of like 14%. So what's gonna happen is, you're gonna have a platform that's 40 foot wide, and then it's gonna jump up 6 feet, be another 40 feet, jump up 6 feet, be another 40 feet. The tracks will keep a continuous grade throughout that whole thing. The actual coaches themselves, we've been in discussions with a custom RV manufacturer that's actually gonna manufacture the coaches, and we're gonna put those on frames that we build over at the railroad in our new, manufacturing facility. And, those are gonna be hydraulically lifted so that we can bring them up, and when we get them into position, we just jack up the down mountain end so they're perfectly flat with the platform. And so that way we can keep that platform very close to the existing grade. And, at the same time, we've also been talking with the manufacturer of the coaches themselves, and they wanted to wrap these, at one point, and make them look like the existing coaches. And we've actually been given consideration to having shots taken of the background of the whole area up there so that it looks like the alpine meadow that exists up there, and wrap those coaches so they, if you're looking down from the summit, it's gonna look like they're part of the alpine meadow that exists there. And I've also offered to the state, although they haven't taken me up on it yet, to wrap the fuel tanks and their sewer treatment plant so that fits in, and looks better as well.
No, anything that you can do to buffer the visual, I'm sure, would help. Excuse me.
Oh,
So
I
I
forgot to
think-
mention
I
one
think-
other thing, we're planning on having all the roofs of these coaches, covered with solar panels.
Were you done with your,
Let's see, I'm just going through the notes of things that would interest you folks, and Wayne just was talking about the visual impact and, you know, keeping the tracks following the existing grade and then just stepping down so that, you know, visually.
yeah, I didn't realize the grade was still 14% in there.
Let's see, so I mentioned, so the well, the railway does have, water rights, and we need to further investigate those, but, there's a potential that we'd be drilling a, new well, there. We're looking into the wellhead protection area, the Forest Service and whatnot.
True.
Holding tanks, for water, in the sewer, the anticipation would be that those would be, as those platforms are terraced down, it gives a nice room to slide, tanks in there so that they're, out of view. The electric, as you know, the, power line to the summit runs along the Cog's, property. We are going to be conducting a study, to determine whether or not that has enough carrying capacity for us to tie in, to that. Wayne had mentioned the solar panels, potentially battery backup for each of those, coaches. The fiber optic cable, we talked about the effluent and the pipe that would be above ground, and we've been working with, Bill Evans, an engineer, and that's, the size of the pipe could be between 4 and 8 inches, but again, no ground disturbance, to that. Wayne mentioned the potential hydro, at the bottom, which we're looking at. Let's see.
Sound like you volunteered to help design that.
Let's see.
My committee would be interested in that.
I had mentioned that, depending upon what we find out for, the electric, and there might be the necessity to locate an emergency backup, generator. We would anticipate that would be, propane, and it would be, enclosed with sound attenuation. I mean, I think if it was ever, running, we would want it to be running, but probably less than the ambient noise that exists, you know, up there now. And it would be located inside, you know, a coach, that's up there.
Certainly wouldn't make any more noise than the generators that are up there
Yeah, right
already that
now.
kick in when
Right.
the power goes down, so.
What other items, let's see. guess one of the questions that I had for you folks is with regards to, we'll have it surveyed because it's going to be very important that we're outside of the Summit Circle and on the Cog's property. What type of detail would you folks be looking at for the plans for the platforms and the tracks? Could we show those simply with a subject to, review? And, I mean, of course, they have to be stamped by an engineer, but they would be, reviewed and approved by, the fire marshal's office. Or what level are you folks?
So normally we require, in a project like that, 5-foot topo. I mean, it certainly would be helpful to have whatever.
We're gonna have better than that anyway.
Yeah, because, for instance, I wasn't appreciating that it's still 14.5% grade there, not a big deal. But yeah, that information is just good to know, good to be able to see.
We're actually working with a company called Mezzanines by Design. They actually build mezzanines and platforms and stuff like that for huge industrial facilities. And they're actually designing the whole platform, and I think they're gonna want better topo
Yeah.
than that
Oh, right,
anyway to
they
do
will.
that stuff.
Yeah.
And they are licensed in all 50 states and will be stamping the drawings and certifying them and everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you'll have the information.
He didn't know about that. I just had that discussion today.
Okay.
Well, I knew about that company, but whether or not we would want to have that detail for, or you guys would require that for the filing.
The requirement is 2-foot contours drawn.
Okay, all right, well, that's good to know. Thank
Yeah, I mean, and Wayne, maybe you can talk about this, with regards to, how this gets, if approved, how this would be constructed.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, we're planning on pouring piers, but these guys designed the foundations and everything, but we've already told them that we're in an area that's critical where we have minimal impact. And so, the plan is that we would use a rough terrain crane to pour the piers that this complete steel infrastructure would be fastened to. And that we'd be working with members. We're gonna try to keep the steel members themselves as small as possible, hopefully only not more than like 12 feet, and everything will just bolt together. The platforms themselves would all be 3/4-inch grating that has holes through it, but it's also got those little rough edges so that you can't slip. But that'll let both light, air, water, and everything else down through there. Because one of the things I wanted to point out with, people always talk about the railroad track going up there. Well, our railroad track doesn't sit on the ground like a normal railroad track does. It's supported by a vent every 12 feet. And in between there, the land is completely undisturbed. I mean, the ties, there's no ties laying on the ground. So there's grass and everything growing right underneath the track. It isn't like a road where there's nothing that grows underneath this. And it'd be the same sort of thing with this platform. It would all be elevated so that, if there's enough light and air that gets down through there, things will grow underneath this.
And I'm assuming, and this is obviously something you'll work with the fire marshal's office on, somehow these cars are gonna be anchored to the ground?
Well, they're gonna be anchored to this platform, and this platform is going to be, these concrete piers that we put in will have earth anchors that go down in the ground, and then the concrete's poured around those. And then the entire platform is gonna be one big superstructure, and those cars will be anchored down to that superstructure. And then if that's 500 feet long by whatever the width is, boy, if that blows over, we got real problems.
So the fire marshal is interested in, from the earth anchors
Yep.
all the way to the construction of the individual coaches as to what materials they'll be made of for, life safety.
Yeah.
So, and we are working with them on all those details.
So before I double check my list, anybody else have any design features they would like to see?
I just have to excuse myself. I have to drive home to Manchester. This mother of three needs to get
Yes,
kids
so
in
need to
bed.
take-
You ready for
Well,
school
thank you very
tomorrow?
much.
Watch
Thank you
out
for
for
coming.
moose.
Yes, I
It's
will.
that time of night.
Thank you.
I don't have a card. I'll reach out, or Earl or Wayne can share my contact
Sure, if we have any questions, we
If you
can
have
just
any
give you a call.
questions, please reach out. I'm happy to have been here tonight to hear the discussion and appreciate your time and your interest in this presentation. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yes, I was wondering, like, there's gonna be, like, basically your two sidings, your platforms, and then the rail of the train up through the center.
Yes.
So how close is all of that stuff, and are there any required setbacks, and do you have to be a certain distance from the train for these other cars?
Obviously, there's setbacks and we're looking to maximize the space between the cars, the cars and the dining. We're looking at this as if you were looking up mountain, that the dining cars would be on the right-hand side and the sleeper cars would be on the left-hand side. We want to have the platform on the left-hand side next to the dining cars, narrower than the platform on the right-hand side, because that's where you're going to be getting most of the traffic. Most of the people tend to get off on the right-hand side. That's where they're going to be getting into the dining cars, so on and so forth. So, yeah, there's going to be.
Do you know what that dimension is? I mean, or is that not
No,
decided
because
yet?
a lot of it is going to be subject to, the approval process as we go forward.
So the county has a 25-foot setback to
Right.
any structures. So if there was going to be a consideration to get into that setback, it would have to go to the zoning board of adjustment for their approval, once a final plan was put together.
Right.
You know, my recommendation would be to do that before going into too much cost and detail on a final plan.
No, that's a good point for sure.
You don't need the level of detail for a variance application that you do for, the next tier is gonna be the conditional use permit. And I think it would help me, John, to help them if I could hear the board talk a little bit about that tonight, and what's gonna make the board comfortable granting the conditional use permit. What questions does their application need to answer? Because that's kind of the next bar, the next hurdle. The site plan details that you're getting into now, I think, are the easy part.
That's the easy part?
Well, first they need the variance for the setback, then they need the conditional use permit that says they can do this thing.
Yeah.
And then there's a checklist for the site plan that I can help them with. So,
Sure.
that's good discussion, but let's just make sure that they know what other questions need to be answered as part of the conditional use permit application.
So if board members have asked all their questions, I'll hit my quick ones. Yes, sir.
I had one. Could you somehow, I guess, for whenever you do the formal thing, is get visual simulations of what it's gonna look like from prominent points? Obviously in the background, you've got a few mountains, you've got clay off to the left, and so visually, all the shots I've seen are looking downslope. I think it would be of great value if you could require that you get a visual simulation of what it's gonna look like from a distance.
No, I don't disagree with that, and that actually was one of the things that I had on my list, which is, yes, simulated views, so we can see from different locations what the project will look like.
So I would ask Mr. Chairman, if there are specific, and I agree, prominent locations that folks would like to see that photos and simulations done from, if you folks can provide that at some point,
Yeah.
then we can work towards that. Absolutely.
one of the certainly from the top. Another question, and it's a follow-up of the questions from the public here. So the elevation at this location is roughly what?
5,800 feet.
5,800, and where the AT crosses, it's closer to?
I'm gonna say it's probably down, I don't know exactly, it would be on one of those Google maps, which.
Mike, you must know, what is it?
In front of us.
You were looking for an elevation or a location?
Well, an elevation, just so, I was trying to understand the difference in height.
53?
That could well be.
But I think
That's just a guess.
a simulation,
You know better, Chris, do you know?
I'm looking, but it's gonna take a while.
I can't speak to the elevation specifically, but I know if you take 500 feet for your platform distance, the Appalachian Trail crosses 480 feet below that.
Okay.
okay, so it's closer than that. Okay.
What's 480 feet below the end of the platform?
Linear feet below the bottom of your platform.
Okay. So certainly a simulation from that point, I think, is something everybody would like to see. And then if there could be a couple of, and not knowing the terrain and not standing there, I can't tell you if you can see into the valley where any of the highways are or not, if it's tucked in.
You really can't.
Okay.
Where it's located and the height that it's gonna be at, you really can't even see over the edges of the mountain.
Okay.
Now, if you go over to Mount Clay or something, you'd be looking down on it.
Well, and that might be another good reference point. Yeah, from the peaks,
Yeah.
looking down in.
Our goal again though is to camouflage
Sure.
those as much as possible so that they look and, yeah, we should have something more specific than that. We haven't been able to get up there to take the photography that we need to try to get some better renditions together.
Because I'm sure that's going to be number one or number two question that's asked, priority that people will be, asking us to consider.
What's number one?
The AT crosses the Cog at about 5,600 feet, according to Gaia.
And you touched on this, but it was on my list. So whether it's one or two is going to be, yes, the impact to the plants and fauna that's up there. So certainly, I appreciated hearing that you've spoken with all the groups that you have already. And yes, I'm confident for the conditional use permit, we'll need to be able to really understand that impact, so that we can, if the board decides to approve it, the board can say, hey, we understand the impact. It meets within the requirements of the master plan and that type of zone and how that's developed. So the more sign-offs you can get from those different groups also, the better.
Yeah, so we have a very open line of communication with those folks, and we're gonna maintain that
That's
all
great.
the way up until we decide to file. And I think we will have reports from heritage, natural heritage, from Fish and Game, and we're crossing our fingers that UNH is gonna get involved as well. So we'll have a lot of studies on
Yeah.
all that. And I spoke briefly about, and Wayne did, about the app and the continued use of students. So we really have come right out of the gate with a really exciting mitigation and education program that I think the summit desperately needs. The mountain desperately needs. So
Interesting, the 71 master plan, somebody suggested that one of the biggest drawbacks to grass and the native grasses and stuff growing up there was the lack of topsoil, and that loads of topsoil should be brought up there.
Really?
But nobody ever did it.
Yeah.
And so as part of our
bring some topsoil? Yeah.
Well, you know, it's going to have to be, sterile topsoil and stuff. That doesn't include any other species of, seeds in it or anything else, but bring that up there and actually, maybe work with UNH to develop a plot that we can monitor and stuff and see what the results of that are, you know, so.
Okay. And let me scan this real quick. I think so the other was an exterior lighting plan and what those visuals would be at night. Talked about that.
It's not gonna be any searchlight.
No searchlights?
They had a huge one up there in the 20s, I think, that they said could beam all the way down into the valley.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Didn't last very long.
No,
Few
it
years
didn't
they
last
took
very
it down.
long. Yeah.
I think Tara had mentioned something about parking. I don't know if that's, I mean, we have lots of parking.
Parking at the top or parking at the bottom?
At the bottom.
At the bottom, yeah.
Tara, did you have a question on that?
I don't have a question, it just needs to be addressed as part of the site plan application.
Oh, okay, alright. I think we've pretty much answered the rest of my list, but yes. When the time comes, yeah, having as many supporting sign-offs by Nature Conservancy, fishing, whoever, you know, that you've been working with would certainly help on our end. You know, to show that that due diligence has been done and they're in support of the project. So, are the tracks in the circle gonna be removed or are they staying?
No, the existing tracks will stay. They
Okay.
just won't get expanded. They'll stay and they'll be maintained, but they won't get expanded.
But all the cars will stop at Lizzie's station and then zip back and forth with the shuttle.
From May 15th through October 15th. During the shoulder parts of the season, they will still go back to where they were before, which will be up
To the top.
at the summit.
Okay.
Did you wanna mention anything about the efforts with regards to the one shuttle train that's being investigated on electric?
Well, yeah, we can talk about that. We have one more.
Just exciting.
We have one more diesel train that we're planning on building because we have the motor for that now. But the next locomotive that we were going to build would have to be a Tier 4, and that's going to require significant redesign of the frames and everything else. And so the next locomotive that the Cog will be building will be all electric. And the plan is that will be the one that will be stationed at the summit to shuttle the people back and forth.
So where do you get the battery for that?
Well, they're making them now because
Other
they're
than that?
using them for trucks and
Now
everything else.
true.
And obviously, since we have a good grade, we have a great opportunity to regenerate electricity on the way back down. And if we're able to put our hydro in down at the bottom, we can recharge it the rest of the way with that. And so we'd be completely off the grid. Yeah.
Who knows?
Interesting, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then yes, the fire marshals, you know, they would be the ones that we would ask to issue any building permits, you know, do all the plan review, which you've done that already, working with them on other projects, so. Cause yeah, this certainly beyond our scope.
And again, we are working with them for each and everything that we've talked about, to make sure that it's doable
For sure.
for their perspective,
So I think that's what I had, yes. Impacts to the plants, to the, you know, location, visuals, and yeah, what the night sky would look like, based on the lighting. Yes, Jamie?
I have a couple of different issues. particularly with the alpine species and carbon footprint, but I want to get a clarification first on the right-of-way. So my understanding is that the right-of-way is 99 feet, 25 feet is buffer.
Will be setbacks by the county.
Setback, but I mean, that's the current situation. And so 50 feet is the active right now. But your plan for Lizzie is to build out the full 99 feet. So what happens to the right-of-way? Does that mean that either it gets waived at the point where you have the highest impact on the line, or do you have to buy land from the White Mountain National Forest, or what?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, the question is that if you're building out to 99 feet, you no longer have a buffer. To be in compliance with having a buffer, you need another 50 feet, 25 on each side. So you need to go out to 149 feet. You don't own those extra 50 feet. Are you going to buy it from the White Mountain National Forest, or are you expecting to be exempted from having the buffer at the point where you have the maximum amount of activity going on, and therefore the maximum need for buffering? And in fact, I don't think 25 feet would even remotely come close to doing the job. So where do we get the buffer at Lizzie?
So we'd be seeking a variance.
A variance
for the entire 25 feet.
Which would mean that you're exempted from having the right-of-way there? I mean the buffer there?
Correct.
I think that's a really worrisome proposition.
Can I just ask a question, Gene? Why do you think that there's a need for a buffer there?
Why? Because you've got a high impact operation there, and even where you're just doing the railroad line, you're required to have the 25 feet. You're gonna have toilets, you're gonna have people wandering around, you're gonna have food, you're gonna have waste. I mean, overnighters, come on. There's basically, you're going right up to the White Mountain National Forest land, and there is gonna be zero buffering if you get your variance.
So what would have to happen is, yes, they would have to apply for a variance. It would go before the Board of Adjustment, and the Board of Adjustment would have to hear all the arguments, just as you're suggesting now, and the arguments by the applicant, and any input that the Forest Service may or may not have. And then, yeah, it'll be up to the Board of Adjustment to make a good decision from all the feedback they get. And so that would be the process in making that request.
So the state is our abutter for a section of this.
Okay.
And the National Forest. And we have met with the National Forest and are discussing it.
And so that would be a noticed public hearing for sure, that everybody would have a chance to, come and give their input.
Okay. On the alpine species, the IPCC report from a week or two ago said we have a couple of years to get our act together after dithering for decades. There's a pretty big carbon footprint leading to and up on the summit. Species that are stressed by climate change are generally forced to move north or upslope. We're at a point where there's no further upslope. So I see some even without the Lizzie development, the congestion and overuse is exacerbating a crisis that we don't have a lot of time to address. So if we're serious about protecting the health of the mountain, the entire mountain, not just the 60 acres, we really need to be a lot more conscientious about climate change and impacts on fragile alpine systems. I'm also getting reports of invasives, so we need studies on that. The alpine species were, to my knowledge, correct me, other than, I know that Natural Heritage Boards from time to time has done studies, but has there been a systematic study since the 1970-71 master plan? I don't think so. And the alpine vegetation has changed considerably since then, so we need to do that. And I was very disappointed to hear Commissioner Stewart say that she hopes to have the master plan for the commission done by the end of the year, because at least one of the commission members has proposed that there be basically a moratorium on development until they can get the environmental assessment, and I would add climate assessment, comprehensively performed, and then they begin the writing process for the master plan, informed by this information and not writing it blind. So it sounds like the state is planning to write a master plan blind about the condition of this stuff, which is only going to make matters worse and put you at a disadvantage in dealing with the questions before you, because you're not going to have the proper information either. So I frankly think that until we have a thorough environmental assessment of both alpine and climate issues, it's very difficult to evaluate a proposal like this. Impossible, frankly.
No, I certainly appreciate those comments. I guess I would encourage urging the state to take those into consideration.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
Friday.
and as you work with the different user groups, yes.
So the Natural Heritage Bureau will study not only the proposed Lizzie Station area, but also all the staging and construction area. So we're hoping that all of that gets studied this summer, and we're going a step further and trying to get UNH to be doing the same thing. All third-party experts, not us.
Right. No, it's certainly a difficult situation. I know they've spent a lot of time and energy in the last 2 years trying to rid some invasives that have come up there. So I know it's important.
We did, Mr. Chairman, as part of the discussions with the state, there's a few other proposals before we got to Lizzie's. We were going to do a land exchange at the summit and do something different up there. So as part of that, the Natural Heritage Bureau did take a look at the fee-owned property in the Summit Circle, that 80 by 200. Also did look at both the left and the right side, looking at mountain of the tracks from, I don't know, pretty good distance, not from Lizzie's up, but so there is some initial data there.
Okay. More the better, sounds like. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. An assessment of the footprint of your development, that's absolutely necessary. But we also need a full assessment of not just the 60 acres, the ecology of the 60 acres, but the mountain. This is an ecosystem. If we degrade one part, we degrade the system. So this is not something that the Natural Heritage Bureau, with its funding, can do in a season. I'm a big supporter of them, but I'm a realist about their funding. The impacts of development at high elevation are profound. Invasives benefit from any kind of disturbance, especially in a fragile system. The trench for the fiber optic line that runs down has been investigated by alpine botanists for recovery since the trench was dug in 2007. And the report is there's no recovery because the disturbance is ongoing. So the impacts are ongoing, and we're talking about a fragile system that may not hang on because of climate change, and we're going to have a heavy impact development on that. And I think that is why we're failing and will fail on climate change as a culture, unless we take these smaller projects and start saying we have to do things differently starting right now.
No, I appreciate that, for sure. I understand.
Earl has a couple of slides that he wants to show you. I mean, we get credited all
blaming anybody, I'm just saying the fact is that this thing exists and it's an ongoing problem that's not healing up.
And I can show you some pictures that I've taken that would demonstrate the opposite. I've got pictures on my camera of flowers growing up in those disturbed areas, and other things taking root. In fact, in some respects, I think disturbing the soil has actually helped things take root.
Well, I'm not an alpine ecologist,
Neither am I.
and I would prefer to hear what the alpine ecologist has to say.
No, and I agree, we should get as good professional advice as we can. Did you have something, Earl, or
No, I can't say.
you've gone forever? Okay.
Talking about.
So with those items that I had and some of the comments that
I'm good.
we've also heard, is there anything else the board is thinking? Because yeah, it's gonna be sort of a two-step process. It's gonna be the conditional use permit, which is more gonna evaluate the impact. And then the site plan, which is the devil's in the details, you know, for how that project would be constructed and built, et cetera. Anything else, like I say, that folks think they would like to see as they consider the impact of the conditional use permit? And hearing and seeing none. Earl, anything else? Wayne?
No, just
Okay.
like to thank you for taking the time, listening to the proposal. Do you want to get into all of those other things?
No.
I think we're good for tonight.
Thank you for bringing this.
And so going forward, if you can keep us posted at the appropriate times of potential timelines, and I know Earl and Tara work together on a regular basis on how to put the applications together. And if Tara has any questions, she'll certainly give us a shout.
We're willing to come back whenever these two guys think it's appropriate.
Okay.
Bring
No, and
you
I'm good with
updates
that.
and talk to you about
The zoning board doesn't meet regularly, so.
So when the time comes, I guess that would also,
Give yourself some lead time for them to get together, that's all I'm saying.
I think it might be helpful for us to, if it's permissible, to regroup like this again, maybe midway through the summer to update you.
Sure.
On, what it is we've collected, what it is we're doing, and then we might have some questions for you and how we might be able to refine things, to work to a point of,
No, makes sense to me.
having an application deemed complete.
Okay. Tara, did you have a question?
Yeah, just, any sense of your goal time-wise?
I keep telling everyone that we should have an application together in September.
So I don't think it's too early to go to the ZBA. I mean, that's, the variance is good for 2 years.
And
Thanks,
that would give you
Tara.
an answer sooner.
Thanks,
versus-
Tara.
No pressure.
Well, it's just, that's your first hurdle.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's gonna be your number one defining parameter.
And you don't need